Hey, film friends, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film, a podcast where we break down movies with some of my closest friends and special guests. And sometimes we have to travel around the world and check in with our good friends in Mumbai. Um, I'm solo this time, but that's perfect for a film with such quiet, beautiful contemplativeness. So I hope you'll join me as we examine Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine Is Light. Okay, so I I had been hearing about this one since the festivals. It didn't win the Palme d'Or, but it was up for I believe a grand jury prize. Payal Kapadia is a name that had been sort of floated around, and obviously up around some discussions of would she be up for best director in certain categories and things like that. Then I finally rented this thing and watched it, and I have thoughts. So I just want to talk them through with you guys, have a little bit of interaction, get your feedback, and see what you think about it. I got to be honest. I didn't do a whole ton of prep for this. I took some notes. I added some little sprinkles of thoughts, but I don't have the breakdown of the categories because I think that this film kind of resists it, to be honest with you. It kind of resists easy categorization. It's a mood picture, it's a feels picture, it's a romantic picture in sort of the best and worst ways. Well, that's not true. I guess I mean to say, if the upside of romanticism is euphoria, the downside it would be what? Melancholy. And I think you've got some of both of those in this film in some powerfully rendered portraits of a couple female characters just trying to kind of make it in Mumbai. So I always start with a plot. And I think it's worth doing a little bit of diving there for this one because of, I think it is central. The story is all about watching what happens. And by story, I mean the themes are all about what happens in watching the interplay and exchange and dance of these three women, right? So, in particular, the two women who are the nurses, Anu and Prabha. And I apologize if I mispronounce any of this. You are feel free to set me straight. I had more than a few of you set me straight on the RR podcast, or the video, which I lovingly embrace because I just think Indian cinema is just a remarkable thing, and it's shelled and factioned, and there's Bollywood and Tollywood, and there's just other pictures everywhere, and it's time that people like me get on board with what's going on. So anyway, this is a tale about embracing an unknown future. So I think it's one that juxtaposes the human heart against cityscapes, which are sometimes lonely, sometimes about souls looking for connection, which we'll come back to, and sometimes sort of so like it's this homey thing and all these possibilities and activities, but it's also this idea that how do we connect in a world so big, right? And so you have three characters. You have two nurses. There's a younger nurse and a slightly older nurse that are roommates and live together. So Prabha's your main character, and her character is she's your sagacious one. She's the older sister type character. She she respects the cultural traditions in which she was reared, and so all three of these women have found their way out of their villages into Mumbai, right? And that becomes important because there's a class aspect to this whole tale as well. And she was placed in an arranged marriage with a man who she hardly met, hardly knew, who then ran off and went to Germany. And started calling once a week or whatever in the beginning, and now has gone to a place where he's basically completely estranged. And yet she's honoring this commitment to this guy Meanwhile, she's being wooed by a doctor, kind of in residence, like a floating doctor, if you will, who wants to write her poetry and is clearly interested in her, right? So that's that story. Anu's story is a little Montague and Capulet, if I'm being honest. It's a little Romeo and Juliet because she is young. She's the spicy one. She's a nurse. She looks up to her Prabha as like an older sister, but she also feels like her beliefs are kind of archaic and wooden and stilted. And why can't she just be free? And so freedom and connection for her character is represented by the idea of running off with a Muslim man who she can't be seen with and who it's against cultural mores to associate with. And so they're sort of stealing away. And it's not it's like hanging out. It's, it's kissing in the rain. It's finding little corners in a parking garage to kiss or make out or whatever. It's not this like highly salacious thing. It's about young love, right? And she's running up against these other norms which are pressing down on her. And then the older lady is a cook in the kitchen, and her story is one about class distinction and about gentrification, really. You got these builders kind of coming in and trying to move her out of her place, out of her tenant, back to her village. And why? Because she can't prove residency, and there's all these issues surrounding that. So that's the dance and the interplay, right? And the thing about this is like the three performances are just beautiful at the center of this. They're different. It's like essentially three different generations almost, at least in terms of mentality. And they're looking for fulfillment. They're looking through love. They're for love for where they live, for their residence. And I think the whole thing is just beautifully shot. It's poignantly captured, but it does move slow. It's quiet. It's contemplative. I love these kinds of films. Ones where you're thinking as much about what the characters are wearing on their face as what they're actually saying. And this is particularly true of Prabha. She's just a very interior, like you can see her heart longing, like she wants to reach out to this man. She wants to break free of these traditions, but she's so steadfast in what she's committed to. And it's left her in a very lonely place. Meanwhile, Anu's reaching out and is embracing this other thing, but in so doing, when the movie finally slows down in one of its more powerful scenes, for her to actually have a conversation with this man, like, what does this look like? The torrid affair, which is always, like I said, it's not insipid. It's not scintillating. I mean, it is, but it's not it's not highly sexualized. It's just young love. And when they finally sit down to be like, can we make this work? Then we're in like a whole different ball game, right? About how we're gonna do this given what their families would say. That's the age-old thing. So I think it's got E Tu Mamá También vibes to it, but I honestly like this film better on various levels. I'm definitely a Korean head to an extent, but that film, I think the coming of ageness, some of the sexual interplay there kind of does get in the way of the actual character study. I don't think that happens here. So this film actually reminded me of two other Asian films in different ways, though it's probably not as good as either of them, in my opinion. The first was Perfect Days, which was the Wim Wenders flick from last year. And just in terms of this whole idea of now that was a man who was serene and calm and in this big cityscape, but was perfectly at peace. If you want to tap into the loneliness a little more, then I think you're going back to the 90s and Chungking Express, which is one of my, probably my favorite Wong Kar-wai flicks. So they're there. They're meditative and expressive in all the right ways. So this one it's some rich world building. And it speaks a lot on social, cultural issues in India while always kind of maintaining this, like I said, this longing, this melancholic tone. And I definitely think this is a feminist film because it centers these three women and their emotional journeys as they're trying to find their way against two things. One is the isolation of city life, and the other is the oppressive nature of the social norms placed on them. Like when she wants to go find him, then she has to get the hijab to put on her head and sort of go undercover. Now she looks at that as like titillating, like, oh, okay, like we got this rendezvous going on, right? And then of course other things come to bear. So it's a slice of life drama about three nurses or two nurses and a cook, three hospital workers. Love, friendship, those are the big things. But I think the words I would use to describe it primarily, the very first one that comes to my mind, and it sounds insulting or twee, but it's not. It's lovely. It's just a lovely film, and the melancholic atmosphere got me. Now, this movie does take a turn in the third act. It becomes kind of a road movie, and so the buried longing of these women begins to like have a chance at full expression. And so where you think that one goes is going to probably determine how you ultimately feel about this movie, because I will say it digs in on the soap operatic turn in that third act. So the things that are very subtly expressed in the first two acts kind of get a little bit on the nose in this last one. But and so I guess what I'm saying is like the Anu Shia's relationship kind of comes full circle. The older woman goes back to her native village, and that's their beach town escape. And Prabha's character has a chance through like a little bit of magical realism, I won't spoil, to finally tell us a little bit about how she's feeling about this arrangement that's been placed on her, right? These societal expectations. So does it lose its way and maybe there is one particular scene involving like a beachside, which I think I do have to admit, I kind of cringed. I was like, come on, man, really? We went there. It works really well in Roma. It did not work very well in this one. I had an issue with that. But one of the reasons that I like this, and I'm talking about it, is I love the way this one lands the plane. I think the conclusions and the resoluteness of Prabha's character and the ways she eventually draws Anu into that, and the final sequence, I just think it's like a chef's kiss. Like, it is a very beautiful way to end this story. And so I think when you break it all down, there's just a lot of good things to say. It's quiet, it's well written, it's beautifully shot, like the cityscapes. I think the examination of class and feminist struggles are all really interesting. I think its cultural idioms are interesting. Like I said, the performances are solid. I do think that you could find this one slow. You could find that it drags. It didn't so much for me because I liked the characters and I was engaged. So I was okay with their journey. But could it have been 15 minutes shorter and still captured the same essence of what it was going for? Yes. Do I think it loses its way a touch in the third act, which keeps it from being like a kind of a complete knockout? Absolutely. But I think overall it really does capture something that I didn't see in any other film from this year, whether it's domestic or international. So for that reason, I think it's deserving of all the plaudits that it has garnered. So that's my thoughts, my basic, pretty simple ones on All We Imagine Is Light. That quote from the title shows up in this final sort of magical realism sequence between two characters at this beachside town, which is pretty powerful. Like thematically, what it's trying to say is powerful, which is to say we just do our best. We go out there, we try to find our way in this world. We try to connect with other human beings. against walls and concrete and sounds and noise and city bustle. And we try to honor our hearts against what the culture and the world expects of us. And I think all of those are laudable things to discuss. So that is that. All We Imagine is Light. I am giving it an FOF rating. To me, it sits right around 4 stars. I'm going to dip it slightly because of some of the things I said in the tail end of the film. So I will give it a 3.9 out of 5 stars, which is an entirely meaningless. No, I'm just kidding. It is what it is, right? But I would love your thoughts, your comments. What did I miss? Were there little things? I mean, I think one of the things I'm interested in hearing, if I have some Indian viewers, is or anyone who's just interested, there are several parts where they're just showing aspects of the city life, like these carnivals and these nighttime sequences, and they're running voiceover of different characters saying things about the city life. Now, what's intriguing about that to me, and this is where I need your feedback, is I'm pretty sure that each of them is spoken in different dialects. At least that's the way my subtitles were rendering them to me, which I think is significant, right? That I live in a nation where we very primarily speak English. I think if there are different things, I think that might even point to different cultural touchstones too, some of which may have went over my head in translation. So I'm interested in that discussion as well. If you got thoughts for me, please let me know. Let me know if you thought there were other films much better than it out of the nation of India this year. I'm sure there are hundreds, and I had a blast with this one. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film. Stay firm, my friends.